My name is Sharon. I'm 28 years old and I thought I knew my family. When my parents announced their 30th anniversary trip to Italy, I was excited to celebrate with them. But when my mom looked me straight in the eye and said, "Flights are $1,200 each. If you cannot afford it, stay behind," I felt my heart sink. I nodded quietly, already calculating how I could make it work despite my tight budget. Little did I know that agreeing to that trip would expose a betrayal so deep it would shatter everything I believed about the people I loved most. Before I tell you what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe because this story gets wild. You won't believe how far some people will go to get what they want, and how one text message changed everything I thought I knew about my own mother. Growing up in Columbus, Ohio, I always felt like I was living in the shadow of my older brother Marcus. Our parents, Linda and Richard, had been married for 30 years, and from the outside, we looked like the perfect middle-class American family. Dad worked as an accountant at a local firm. Mom stayed home when we were young and later worked part-time at a dental office. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house with a white picket fence, attended church on Sundays, and took annual camping trips to Lake Erie. But inside our home, there was always an undercurrent I couldn't quite name. Marcus, who was 3 years older than me, seemed to effortlessly earn our parents' praise and attention. He was the star of his high school debate team, graduated valedictorian, and went on to law school on a full scholarship. Meanwhile, I struggled with math. Barely made it through college with student loans. I'm still paying off and landed a marketing coordinator job at a small advertising agency that pays just enough to cover my rent and groceries. The contrast became even more stark when Marcus married Jessica 2 years ago. She came from money. Her father owned several car dealerships across Ohio, and she wore designer clothes to every family gathering. They lived in a sprawling suburban home with a 3-car garage, took vacations to Napa Valley, and always seemed to have the latest everything. During family dinners, the conversation inevitably turned to Marcus's latest case victories or Jessica's charity work, while my contributions to the conversation were met with polite nods and quick subject changes. The anniversary trip announcement came during one of these family dinners in March. Mom had made her famous pot roast, and we were all gathered around the old oak dining table Dad had built when I was in elementary school. The conversation had been typical. Marcus describing a high-profile case he'd just won, Jessica showing off her new Cartier watch, when Mom suddenly stood up and tapped her wine glass with her fork. "Your father and I have an announcement," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "We've decided to celebrate our 30th anniversary with a trip to Italy. We've always dreamed of seeing Rome, Florence, and the Amalfi Coast." Dad smiled and reached for Mom's hand. "We thought it would be wonderful if you kids could join us. It would mean the world to us to have our whole family together for such a special milestone." My heart immediately leaped with joy. A family trip to Italy sounded like a dream come true. I'd been working overtime for months, saving every penny I could, and I thought maybe this could be my chance to create some beautiful memories with my family. But then Mom's expression shifted slightly and she continued in a tone that was just a bit too casual. "Now we'll be covering our own expenses, of course, but we expect you kids to handle your own flights and accommodations. We found some lovely flights that leave on June 15th, and they're $1,200 each. If you cannot afford it, stay behind." The words hit me like a physical blow. $1,200 was more than my monthly take-home pay after taxes. I felt my face flush with embarrassment as I realized that what seemed like a generous family invitation was actually a financial test I was destined to fail. Marcus immediately jumped in. "That sounds perfect, Mom. Jessica and I have been wanting to visit Europe anyway. We can definitely make that work." Jessica nodded enthusiastically. "Oh, this will be so much fun. I'll start researching the best restaurants and shopping districts in Rome." Meanwhile, I sat there, calculating and recalculating in my head. $1,200 for the flight, plus hotels, meals, activities, shopping. I was looking at easily $3,000 for a week, which was more than I had in my savings account. But the way Mom had phrased it so matter-of-factly, so dismissively, made it clear that my financial struggles were not her concern. I noticed something else, too. Mom kept fidgeting with her napkin, and she wouldn't quite meet my eyes when she talked about the trip details. She seemed unusually nervous for someone who was just sharing exciting vacation plans. She kept mentioning specific flights, specific dates, almost like she had already made all the arrangements without consulting anyone. "I'll make it work," I finally said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I really want to be there with you both." Mom's smile seemed forced. "Well, we'll see. The deposits need to be paid by next week, so you'll need to decide quickly." As I drove home that night to my small one-bedroom apartment, I felt a familiar ache in my chest. It was the same feeling I'd had throughout my childhood, whenever Marcus got something I couldn't have, whenever I felt like I wasn't quite good enough for my own family. But this time, I was determined to prove them wrong. I was going to find a way to make this trip happen no matter what it took. I was sitting at my desk at work the following Tuesday, trying to focus on a presentation for a client, when my phone buzzed with a text notification. It was from my credit card company. "Alert: unusual activity detected on your account. Charge of $4,238 to Romano Travel Services. If this was not you, please contact us immediately." My blood ran cold. $4,000. I hadn't made any charges like that. I immediately opened my banking app, my hands shaking as I navigated to my credit card account. There it was, clear as day. A charge for $4,238 to something called Romano Travel Services, made just 20 minutes ago. But that wasn't all. As I scrolled through the transaction details, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The charge description read, 4 business class tickets to Rome, Italy. Departure June 15, 2024. 4 tickets. Business class. The exact same departure date my mom had mentioned. I immediately called the credit card company, my heart pounding as I waited on hold. When I finally got through to a representative, I could barely keep my voice steady. "I need to report fraudulent charges on my account," I said. "Someone has used my card to purchase airline tickets." The representative, whose name was Amanda, walked me through the details. The tickets had been purchased online using my card number, security code, and billing address. The email confirmation had been sent to an address I didn't recognize, lindasharon2024@gmail.com. Linda, my mother's name, combined with my name. "I need to dispute these charges immediately and lock my account," I told Amanda, my mind racing. "Of course, Miss Sharon. I can see these charges are definitely suspicious. 4 business class tickets to Rome for over $4,000. We'll reverse these charges immediately and issue you a new card. You should receive it within 3 business days." After I hung up, I sat in my cubicle staring at my phone screen, trying to process what had just happened. Someone had stolen my credit card information and used it to buy 4 business class tickets to Rome. 4 tickets for what I assumed was my parents, Marcus and Jessica. And the email address used contained my mother's name. The pieces started falling into place in a way that made me feel sick. My mom's nervous behavior during dinner, her insistence on specific flights and specific dates, the way she'd dismissed my financial concerns so casually. And now, mysteriously, someone had used my credit card to purchase tickets for the exact trip she described. I thought back to the last few times I'd been at my parents' house. I always kept my purse in the front hall closet when I visited the same place I'd put it since I was a teenager. My wallet was always inside with all my credit cards. It would have been so easy for someone to take pictures of my cards while I was in the bathroom or helping Mom in the kitchen. But surely my own mother wouldn't do something like that. There had to be another explanation. Maybe it was identity theft from a data breach, or maybe someone had skimmed my card at a restaurant. I tried to convince myself that it was just a terrible coincidence, but deep down I already knew the truth. The email address was too specific, the timing too perfect, the number of tickets too exact. Someone in my family had stolen my credit card information to pay for their Italian vacation. And based on the email address and the way Mom had been acting, I was pretty sure I knew who. The rest of the workday passed in a blur. I couldn't concentrate on anything. I kept checking my phone, hoping for some kind of reasonable explanation, but none came. Instead, I found myself remembering other incidents over the years. Times when money had gone missing from my purse during family gatherings. Times when I'd been blamed for expenses I was sure I hadn't incurred. Times when I'd felt gaslit and confused about my own financial situation. By the time I got home that evening, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to pretend it didn't happen or make excuses for whoever had done this to me. I was going to find out the truth, and I was going to make sure there were consequences. The first thing I did when I got home was check my home security system. I'd installed cameras throughout my apartment after a break-in scare the previous year, but I also had a camera in my car that recorded continuously. More importantly, my parents had a security system too, one that I'd helped Dad install last Christmas. If I could access those recordings from recent family visits, I might be able to find proof of what had happened. I called Dad first, trying to keep my voice casual. "Hi, Dad. I was wondering if I could access the security footage from your house. I think I might have left my earrings there last weekend, and I wanted to check the footage to see if I can spot where I put them." Dad was happy to help, giving me the login information for their security system. "You know how to access it remotely, right? Your mom is at her book club tonight, so I'm just watching the game." Within minutes, I was logged into their system, scrolling through footage from the past few weeks. I focused on the times when I'd been at their house, particularly last Sunday, when we'd had dinner together. I fast-forwarded through hours of mundane footage until I found what I was looking for. There it was, clear as day. The timestamp showed last Sunday at 6:47 p.m. I watched myself get up from the dinner table and head toward the bathroom. The camera angle showed the front hallway where I'd left my purse on the coat rack. About 2 minutes after I'd left the room, I saw my mother walk into the hallway. She looked around nervously, then quickly opened my purse. My heart was pounding as I watched her take out my wallet and pull out my credit cards. She held them up to the light, clearly photographing both sides of each card with her phone. The whole thing took less than 30 seconds. She put everything back exactly as it had been and hurried back to the kitchen, arriving just before I returned from the bathroom. I watched the footage 3 more times, each viewing making me feel sicker. This wasn't a crime of opportunity or a moment of weakness. This was calculated, planned, deliberate. My own mother had systematically stolen my financial information while I was a guest in her home. But I needed more evidence. I logged into my phone carrier's website and checked the call logs and text messages from Mom's phone number. Nothing suspicious there, but then I realized she probably wouldn't be stupid enough to use her regular phone for something like this. I started researching Romano Travel Services, the company that had charged my card. It took some digging, but I eventually found their website. They specialized in luxury European vacations, and sure enough, they had a package deal for Italy that included business-class flights departing June 15th. The package was for 4 people and cost exactly $4,238. Then I decided to do something I'd never done before. I created a fake email account and sent a message to lindasharon2024@gmail.com, the address that had been used for the ticket confirmation. "Hi, I'm from Romano Travel Services, following up on your recent booking. We need to confirm some details about your June 15th departure to Rome. Please call us at your earliest convenience." I included a Google Voice number I'd just set up so I could see if anyone actually responded. Within 2 hours, my Google Voice number rang. "Hello, this is Linda calling about the Rome trip booking. I got your email." It was my mother's voice, my own mother calling about the fraudulent charges on my credit card. I didn't answer the call, but I saved the voicemail. Now I had video evidence of her stealing my card information and audio evidence of her responding to emails about the fraudulent charges. The case was building, but I still needed to know who else was involved. There was no way Mom had planned this entire scheme by herself. The next day, I decided to do some more investigation. I called Jessica, pretending I was excited about the Italy trip and wanted to coordinate our packing. Oh, the Italy trip, Jessica said, sounding genuinely excited. Marcus told me your mom had handled all the flight arrangements. Wasn't that sweet of her? She said she wanted to make sure we all got seats together, so she booked everything through some travel service that specializes in family vacations. She booked everything? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Yes, she even upgraded us all to business class as a surprise. She said it was her anniversary gift to the whole family. Marcus was so touched that she'd spend that much money on all of us. My hands were shaking as I hung up the phone. So Marcus and Jessica knew that Mom had booked their flights. They knew she'd upgraded everyone to business class, and they'd just accepted that she was paying thousands of dollars for their vacation without asking any questions about where that money had come from. Either they were completely naive or they were in on the scheme. I decided to test Marcus directly. I sent him a text. Hey, I'm having some credit card issues. Someone made some fraudulent charges for airline tickets. You haven't had any problems like that recently, have you? His response came back within minutes. No problems here. That sucks though. You should definitely report it to your card company. Identity theft is so common these days. He was lying to me. He knew exactly what those charges were, and he was pretending to be sympathetic while letting me believe I was the victim of random identity theft. The betrayal was complete. It wasn't just my mother who had stolen from me. My brother and sister-in-law were accomplices, willing beneficiaries of money they knew had been taken from me without my permission. I spent that entire evening crying not just because of the money, but because of what this meant about my family. These weren't strangers who had victimized me. These were the people who were supposed to love and protect me, and they'd chosen to exploit me instead. But by the next morning, my sadness had transformed into something else: determination. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I was going to expose what they'd done, and I was going to make sure they faced consequences for their actions. I spent the next few days carefully planning my approach. I couldn't just confront them with accusations. I needed to be strategic, methodical, and prepared for them to try to gaslight me or turn the situation around somehow. First, I made copies of all my evidence. I downloaded the security footage to multiple devices and cloud storage accounts. I saved the voicemail from my mom. I printed out all the credit card statements and documentation from my fraud dispute. I took screenshots of the Romano Travel Services website and their Italy package details. Then I called my Uncle Robert, my dad's younger brother. Robert had always been the black sheep of the family, partly because he'd never been impressed by Marcus, and had sometimes made comments about the way our family dynamics worked. If anyone would believe me and support me, it would be him. "Sharon," Robert said when I called. "What a nice surprise. How are you doing, kiddo?" "Uncle Robert, I need to talk to you about something serious. Can you meet me for coffee this weekend? I need advice about a family situation." We met that Saturday at a little cafe downtown, away from anywhere we might run into other family members. I laid out the entire situation for him, showing him all the evidence I'd gathered. Robert listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as I explained what had happened. "I wish I could say I'm surprised," he finally said when I finished. "But I've always suspected your mother was capable of something like this. And Marcus, that boy has always had a sense of entitlement that bothered me." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Sharon, there have been rumors in the family for years. Questions about money that went missing from your grandmother's purse during visits. Suspicions about some jewelry that disappeared after family gatherings. Your mom always had explanations, and everyone wanted to believe her, but I've had my doubts." This was news to me. Why didn't anyone ever say anything? Because she's family and because she's clever about it. She never takes enough to make a big fuss about, and she's good at making people doubt themselves. But this is different. This is a serious crime, Sharon. This is credit card fraud, identity theft. This isn't something you can just sweep under the rug. Robert helped me research my legal options. We found a lawyer who specialized in fraud cases, and I scheduled a consultation for the following week. We also researched the process for filing a police report and what evidence I would need. You know they're going to try to manipulate you, Robert warned me. "They're going to say it was a misunderstanding, or that they were planning to pay you back, or that they thought you'd be okay with it. Don't let them gaslight you." I also decided I needed to tell my dad what was happening before I confronted everyone else. Dad had always been the gentler parent, and I suspected he might not know about Mom's scheme. If there was any chance of salvaging some family relationships, it would probably be with him. I called Dad and asked if I could come over on Sunday afternoon when Mom would be at her sister's house. I told him I needed to discuss something important about the Italy trip. When I arrived at my childhood home, Dad was in his workshop in the garage refinishing an old rocking chair. The familiar smell of wood stain and the sound of his radio playing classic rock made me feel nostalgic for simpler times. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" Dad asked, setting down his sandpaper and giving me his full attention. I pulled out my phone and showed him the security footage of Mom taking pictures of my credit cards. I watched his face change as he realized what he was seeing. "Richard, I need you to understand that Mom used my credit card to buy airline tickets for everyone's Italy trip. $4,000 worth of business class tickets. She stole my financial information and committed fraud." Dad sat down heavily on his workbench stool. "Sharon, there has to be some kind of mistake. Your mother would never—" "Dad, look at the evidence. This is security footage from your own house. This is her voice on the voicemail. This is documentation from my credit card company showing the fraudulent charges." I spent the next hour walking him through everything I discovered. I could see him struggling to process the information, wanting to defend his wife, but unable to argue with the clear evidence in front of him. "What are you going to do?" he finally asked. "I'm going to confront them, all of them, and I'm going to press charges if they don't make this right immediately." Dad looked older than I'd ever seen him. "Your mother and we've had some financial struggles lately. Business has been slow at the accounting firm, and we've been dipping into our retirement savings more than we should. But I never imagined she would do something like this." "Dad, this isn't just about money. This is about trust and respect, and the fact that she was willing to commit a serious crime and let me take the financial hit for her vacation. This is about the fact that Marcus and Jessica knew what she was doing and said nothing." "What do you need from me?" Dad asked quietly. "I need you to be there when I confront them. I need you to support me when they try to make me feel crazy or tell me I'm overreacting. Can you do that?" Dad nodded slowly. "Yes, I can do that. What she did was wrong, Sharon. Whatever her reasons, whatever our financial situation, stealing from your own daughter is unforgivable." We planned the confrontation for the following Sunday, when everyone would be gathered for our usual family dinner. Dad would make sure everyone came, telling them we needed to have a family meeting about the Italy trip. I would present my evidence and demand accountability. I spent that week preparing myself emotionally for what was going to be one of the most difficult conversations of my life. I practiced what I was going to say, anticipated their likely responses, and reminded myself that I deserved better than this treatment. Sunday evening arrived faster than I wanted it to. I sat in my car outside my parents' house for several minutes, building up the courage to go inside. I could see through the dining room window that everyone was already there: Mom, Dad, Marcus, and Jessica, all sitting around the same table where this nightmare had started just a few weeks earlier. I walked in through the front door, my laptop bag slung over my shoulder containing all the evidence I'd gathered. The conversation stopped when I entered the dining room, and I could immediately sense that something felt different. Mom seemed more nervous than usual, and Marcus kept glancing at his watch like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Sharon," Mom said with forced cheerfulness. "Perfect timing. We were just talking about the Italy trip. I have some exciting updates about our itinerary." "Actually," I said, setting my laptop on the table, "I have some updates too about how the trip is being paid for." The room went silent. I could see Dad shifting uncomfortably in his chair, clearly struggling with what he knew was about to happen. "I'm not sure what you mean," Mom said, but her voice had lost its confident tone. I opened my laptop and pulled up the security footage. "I mean this," I said, turning the screen so everyone could see. This is footage from last Sunday when you went through my purse and photographed my credit cards. The video played in devastating silence. I watched their faces as they saw the clear evidence of what Mom had done. Marcus's jaw dropped. Jessica covered her mouth with her hand. Mom's face went completely pale. "Sharon, I can explain," Mom started, but I held up my hand to stop her. "Let me finish. On Tuesday, someone used my credit card information to purchase 4 business-class tickets to Rome through Romano Travel Services. $4,238 charged to my account without my permission. When I called to dispute the charges, I found out the email confirmation was sent to lindasharon2024@gmail.com. I played the voicemail recording of Mom calling about the booking. Her own voice filled the room, confirming her involvement in the fraud. "This is identity theft and credit card fraud," I continued. "These are serious crimes. And based on my conversations with Jessica and Marcus, I know that all of you were aware that Mom had booked your flights, and none of you questioned where the money was coming from." The room erupted in chaos. Mom started crying and insisting it was all a misunderstanding. Marcus jumped up and started yelling that I was being dramatic and that families should handle things privately. Jessica tried to claim she had no idea anything wrong had happened. "Stop," I said, raising my voice above theirs. "I'm not done." I pulled out printouts of all my documentation. I have copies of everything: the security footage, the voicemail, the credit card statements, the email evidence. I've already filed a dispute with my credit card company, and they've confirmed this is fraud. I've consulted with a lawyer, and I know exactly what my legal options are. "You consulted with a lawyer?" Marcus asked, his lawyer instincts clearly kicking in. "Sharon, this is family business. You don't involve lawyers in family business." "You're right," I said. "Family business should stay in the family, which is why I'm giving you all a chance to make this right before I file a police report." Mom was sobbing now. "Sharon, honey, we were going to pay you back. We just needed to float the money for a little while. Business has been so hard, and we wanted this trip to be special." "You were going to pay me back with what money?" I asked. "And you were going to pay me back when, after you'd already taken the trip that I couldn't afford to take, after you'd enjoyed a vacation that was literally paid for by stealing from me." Dad finally spoke up. "Linda, what you did was wrong. There's no excuse for it. Sharon has every right to be angry." "Thank you, Dad," I said. "Because it gets worse. This isn't the first time money has gone missing around Mom. Uncle Robert told me there have been rumors for years about missing money and jewelry after family gatherings." Marcus tried to take control of the conversation. "Look, this is clearly a misunderstanding that got out of hand. Mom made a mistake, but we can fix this. We'll pay you back for the tickets, and we can all move on." "You'll pay me back with what money?" I repeated. "Jessica just told me last week that you thought Mom was paying for the business class upgrades as her anniversary gift to the family. So either you're lying now or you were lying then." Jessica squirmed in her seat. I might have misunderstood what Marcus told me." "No," I said firmly. "You understood perfectly. You all knew that Mom was paying for flights she couldn't afford, and none of you cared enough to ask where the money was coming from. You were happy to let someone else foot the bill for your vacation, even if it meant that someone couldn't afford to come." The truth was finally sinking in for all of them. They hadn't just been passive beneficiaries of Mom's theft. They'd been willing participants, eager to accept expensive flights as long as they didn't have to examine too closely how those flights were being paid for. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to cancel these tickets immediately and ensure that every penny is refunded to my credit card account. You're going to sign a written acknowledgement of what happened and a promise that nothing like this will ever happen again. And you're all going to get financial counseling because this behavior is not normal or acceptable." "And if we don't," Marcus asked, his voice full of challenge. "Then I file a police report tomorrow morning, and you can all explain to the authorities why you thought it was okay to commit credit card fraud. Marcus, you can explain to the State Bar Association why you were involved in a criminal conspiracy. And Mom, You can explain to a judge why you thought stealing from your own daughter was an acceptable way to fund your vacation." The room fell silent again. The weight of real consequences was finally hitting them. The next few hours were some of the most intense of my life. Mom continued to cry and beg for forgiveness, insisting that she'd never meant to hurt me and that she'd just made a terrible mistake. Marcus went into full lawyer mode, trying to negotiate and minimize the situation, arguing about definitions and technicalities. Jessica mostly stayed quiet, clearly realizing that her involvement made her vulnerable to legal consequences too. But I'd learned something important about myself that evening. I'd found my voice, and I wasn't going to let them intimidate me or manipulate me anymore. "The crying needs to stop, Mom," I said firmly. "You're not the victim here. You planned this, you executed it, and you were perfectly happy to let me pay for everyone's vacation while excluding me from the trip I was actually paying for." "But honey," Mom pleaded, "you know we love you. We just got desperate. The business has been so slow and we haven't had a real vacation in years." "If you loved me, you wouldn't have stolen from me," I replied. "If you respected me at all, you would have asked for help instead of just taking what you wanted. And if you were really desperate, you would have planned a vacation you could actually afford." Marcus tried a different approach. "Look, Sharon, I get that you're angry, but think about what you're really talking about here. You want to destroy our family over a misunderstanding about money. You want to send our mother to jail. I want accountability," I said. "I want you all to understand that what you did was serious and wrong and that there have to be consequences. This wasn't a misunderstanding, Marcus. This was a planned crime that you were all happy to benefit from." "We didn't know," Jessica finally spoke up. "Yes, you did," I said. "Maybe you didn't know the specific details, but you knew that Mom was paying for expensive flights for everyone, and you never questioned whether she could afford it or where the money was coming from. You were willfully ignorant because it benefited you." Dad had been mostly quiet during this confrontation, but now he stood up. "This needs to stop. Linda, what you did was theft. There's no other way to look at it. You stole from our daughter and you involved Marcus and Jessica in covering it up." "I didn't cover anything up," Marcus protested. "You lied to Sharon when she asked you about credit card fraud," Dad said. "You pretended to be sympathetic while you knew exactly what those charges were. That's covering it up." Over the next several hours, we worked out the details of how they were going to make this right. The tickets would be canceled immediately with full refunds processed back to my credit card account. Mom would sign a written confession acknowledging what she'd done. Marcus and Jessica would write statements acknowledging their knowledge and participation. Most importantly, they would all agree to stay out of my financial life completely. No more access to my personal information. No more assumptions about what I could or should pay for. No more treating me like a backup funding source for their lifestyle choices. "What about the Italy trip?" Mom asked quietly. "What about it?" I said. "You can plan whatever vacation you can actually afford, but I won't be going with you and I won't be paying for any part of it." "But it's our anniversary," Dad said sadly. "Then celebrate it in a way that doesn't require committing crimes," I replied. "There are plenty of beautiful places you can visit that don't cost $4,000 in flights." By the time I left their house that night, I was emotionally exhausted, but also strangely relieved. The truth was finally out in the open. The manipulation and gaslighting had stopped. They could no longer pretend that their treatment of me was normal or acceptable. Marcus and Jessica left without saying goodbye to me, clearly angry that their free vacation had been canceled. Mom was still crying, though now it seemed more like self-pity than genuine remorse. But Dad walked me to my car and gave me a hug. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "You stood up for yourself, and you were right to do it. What your mother did was wrong, and I'm sorry I didn't see it happening." "Dad, I don't want to lose you in all of this," I said. "But I can't pretend this didn't happen, and I can't trust Mom around my personal information anymore." "I understand," he said. "We'll figure out how to move forward. But you did the right thing tonight." The weeks that followed were both liberating and difficult. True to their word, The airline tickets were canceled and the money was refunded to my credit card account. I received written statements from all three of them acknowledging what had happened and promising it wouldn't happen again. But the family dynamics were forever changed. Marcus and Jessica stopped speaking to me entirely, apparently believing that I'd overreacted and damaged the family by insisting on accountability. They missed Marcus's birthday dinner the following month and didn't invite me to Jessica's baby shower. It hurt, but I realized that relationships built on my willingness to be taken advantage of weren't relationships worth preserving. Mom went through what seemed like genuine soul-searching. She started seeing a therapist to address what she called her money issues and began attending a support group for people with financial problems. She wrote me several long letters apologizing and trying to explain her behavior, though she still seemed to think that their financial stress justified what she'd done. Dad and I slowly rebuilt our relationship. He started meeting me for coffee once a week, just the two of us, and we talked about things we'd never discussed before. He admitted that he'd suspected Mom had problems with boundaries around money, but had always made excuses for her behavior. "I think I enabled her by not asking hard questions," he told me during one of our coffee meetings. When money went missing or bills were higher than expected, I always accepted her explanations because it was easier than confronting the possibility that she might be lying. I also started therapy to process the emotional impact of what had happened. My therapist helped me understand that what I'd experienced was a form of financial abuse and that the betrayal I felt was completely justified. She also helped me work through the complicated grief of losing family relationships, even relationships that hadn't been healthy. "You didn't destroy your family by setting boundaries," she told me. "You exposed dysfunction that was already there." Healthy families don't steal from each other, and they don't gang up on the person who asks for accountability. One of the most important things I learned was to trust my instincts. For years, I'd dismissed my feelings of being treated unfairly, telling myself I was being too sensitive or asking for too much. But my instincts had been right all along. I was being treated unfairly and I deserved better. I also made practical changes to protect myself. I opened new bank accounts at a different financial institution. I changed all my passwords and security questions. I stopped carrying my purse into my parents' house during visits, instead locking it in my car. I also installed better security features on all my financial accounts and signed up for identity monitoring services. Professionally, something interesting happened. The confidence I'd gained from standing up to my family translated into standing up for myself at work, too. I started speaking up more in meetings, asking for the raise I deserved and taking on projects that showcased my abilities. Within 6 months, I'd been promoted to senior marketing coordinator with a substantial salary increase. 3 months after the confrontation, I used some of the money I'd been saving to take a solo trip to Ireland. It was my first international vacation, and it was absolutely magical. I stayed in charming bed and breakfasts, took photos of ancient castles, and had conversations with interesting people from all over the world. Most importantly, I proved to myself that I didn't need my family's approval or financial support to create beautiful experiences in my life. On my last night in Dublin, I sat in a cozy pub listening to traditional Irish music and reflecting on how much my life had changed. 6 months earlier, I'd been a person who accepted scraps of attention and respect from people who claimed to love me. Now I was a person who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to demand better treatment. I posted a photo on social media from my trip, a picture of me smiling in front of the cliffs of Moher. Within an hour, I had dozens of comments from friends and coworkers telling me how happy I looked and asking about my adventure. The contrast with my family's silence was stark, but it didn't hurt the way it once would have. As I'm telling this story now, almost a year later, I can honestly say that standing up to my family was one of the best decisions I've ever made. It wasn't easy, and there were definitely moments when I wondered if I'd done the right thing. But I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for people is to refuse to enable their worst behaviors. My relationship with Dad has actually grown stronger through this experience. He left Mom 6 months after the confrontation, saying that he couldn't stay married to someone who would steal from their own child and show no genuine remorse. They're in the process of getting divorced, and while I'm sad about the end of their marriage, I'm proud of Dad for choosing to do the right thing. Mom has been in therapy and claims to be working on herself, but she still sends me messages asking when we can get past this and move on as a family. She doesn't seem to understand that trust once broken this badly takes years to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. She also still seems to think that her financial stress justified her actions, which tells me she hasn't really learned the lesson she needs to learn. Marcus and Jessica did eventually reach out to apologize, but only after Marcus faced some professional consequences for his involvement in the fraud. Apparently, someone at his law firm found out about the situation, and he was required to report it to the State Bar Association. He received a formal reprimand that will stay on his record for several years. The apology felt more like damage control than genuine remorse, so I haven't rebuilt those relationships, but I've built new relationships that are healthier and more supportive. I've gotten closer to Uncle Robert and his family, who've become a chosen family of sorts. I've also made new friends through my hobbies and volunteer work, people who value honesty and integrity the way I do. One of the most important things I've learned is that family doesn't give someone the right to treat you badly. For years, I accepted poor treatment because these were my relatives, people I was supposed to love unconditionally. But love without respect isn't really love at all, and unconditional love doesn't mean accepting unacceptable behavior. I've also learned to trust my financial instincts and protect my resources carefully. I no longer feel guilty about having boundaries around money, and I don't let anyone make me feel selfish for protecting what I've worked hard to earn. Money represents more than just dollars and cents. It represents security, independence, and the ability to make choices about your own life. The Italy trip never happened, by the way. After the tickets were canceled, my parents planned a much more modest vacation to a state park in Michigan. Dad invited me to join them for a day trip, which I did, and it was actually a lovely time. Sometimes the best experiences are the ones that don't require putting yourself into debt or compromising your values. I did eventually make it to Italy, though. Last month I took a 2-week vacation to Rome, Florence, and the Amalfi Coast. I stayed in beautiful hotels, ate incredible food, and saw art and architecture that took my breath away. Most importantly, I paid for every bit of it myself with money I'd earned and saved through my own hard work. On my last evening in Rome, I sat in a cafe near the Trevi Fountain and thought about how different this trip was from the one my family had originally planned. Instead of being surrounded by people who saw me as a financial resource to be exploited, I was surrounded by strangers who treated me with basic courtesy and respect. Instead of worrying about money I couldn't afford to spend, I was enjoying a vacation I'd carefully planned and budgeted for. I learned that love without respect isn't love at all. Real family lifts you up. They don't tear you down to build themselves up. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away from people who don't value you, even when they share your DNA. And sometimes the most important word you can learn to say is no, especially to people who've never heard it from you before. If you're in a similar situation, trust your gut. You deserve better than being someone's financial doormat, and you have the power to change your story. It won't be easy, and you might lose relationships you thought were important. But you'll gain something much more valuable: your self-respect and the knowledge that you're strong enough to stand up for yourself when it matters most. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who were taking advantage of you? How did you find the courage to set boundaries with people you love? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding your strength and standing up for yourself. Thank you so much for listening, and remember that you deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, no matter who's doing the treating. Here's to all of us finding the courage to demand better and never settling for less than we deserve.